The goods from the woods.
Hot damn! Welcome to the Goods from the Woods. My name is Rivers Langley, and this is episode 295 of our program. Thank y'all so much for being with us. This is going to be part 2 of our very special series all about the wild world of Memphis Wrestling. And I wanted to say thanks so much to everyone out there for all the nice comments that I got last week for our Sputnik Monroe episode. I love telling that story, and if you've not already, go back and check that out in the archives. I also wanted to shout out my friends Ian and Alexis over at the fantastic Violet Wanderers podcast. I completely forgot to mention this last week, but the impetus for me to go and do a deep dive on Sputnik actually came from my most recent appearance on their show. We did a hilarious wrestling roundtable with Gareth Reynolds from the Dollop podcast, and I ended that show by talking about Sputnik and then realized, like, hey, this would actually be a cool full-length episode. And that is episode number 112 of their podcast. If you want to go hear it, it's in their archives. I always love cutting it up with the Violet Wanderers and Gareth, some of the best people on earth right there. Okay, on to our business for today. We've got 2 great guests sitting in with us for Memphis Wrestling Part 2, here to talk about Andy Kaufman, Terry Funk, and all of the Jerrys. We've got our returning champion, John Hastings of the Wrestler Review podcast, back in studio for this one, and live via satellite, it's Matt McCarthy from the We Watch Wrestling podcast, making his first appearance on the show. It's a damn crime. I don't know why it took 295 episodes for me to ask Matt to be on here, but here we are. As always, you can support our show on Patreon, patreon.com/thegoodspod. We've got a brand new bonus episode up there right now, all about Josh Brolin's first foray into the superhero game from 2010, the hilariously bad Jonah Hex. I'm chopping it up with Richard Eden from the Yukon Comedy Festival, as well as the fantastic Dr. DC podcast. So we're talking Jonah Hex. We're talking a Batman time-traveling cowboy side villain. So that guy, he knows what he's talking about. That's a very fun episode. Go check us out there. The second best way to support this show is to go to Apple Podcasts and rate, review, and subscribe. Okay, that is it for me up top. Episode 295 of The Goods from the Woods, all about that sweet, sweet Memphis wrestling heat, starts right now. Joining us again, it's John Hastings from the Wrestlers Review.
What's up, everybody? It is Wrestler Review.
Wrestler Review.
Wrestlers Review is the Russian copy that is not nearly as good, and they're just reviewing Boris Zukov week on and week out.
And also joining us via satellite up on the Titantron from Arena McSee in the Valley of San Fernando, it is wrestling Matt McCarthy. What's up, man?
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, of course.
Life is happening.
That's okay. Life is always happening to Matt McCarthy.
I like it. Very good.
Also, I should add, I forgot to add to your list there, recently made the CEO of Ben and Jerry's as well.
You know, you'd think that people with thumbs would, and not, now I feel like I'm offending people who were born without thumbs or something. I'm just saying people with opposable thumbs who have evolved would consider for 1 second that Matt McCarthy might be a common name.
I have been loving the past week. Ben and Jerry's has been, dipping their toe as they do from time to time into the political world. And apparently their CEO is a man named Matt McCarthy. And because our Matt McCarthy has a check mark on Twitter, people just assume he's Ben and Jerry's, and Matt has been getting yelled at by crazy people all week.
I can do you one better. I have a friend whose name is Chris Martin, and his Twitter picture is him holding a piece of paper that says "Not in Coldplay." His Twitter handle name is Chris M Comedy, and if Coldplay does anything, he gets hundreds of tweets, including "Why does it say comedian on your Twitter bio? Aren't you in Coldplay?" And he has to write, "I very much am not in Coldplay."
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
For a while, his Twitter bio just said, "I am not in Coldplay." That Chris Martin is not on Twitter.
Before we get into our topic today, what do you think is the craziest response that you've gotten this week, Matt?
Well, some guy, I don't know if he was a bot or like he joined Twitter that week and now the account is gone. So the odds are pretty bad. But I guess what happened was Ben and Jerry's said that they're going to close their stores in I guess in Israel or parts of Israel.
It's just
or
in the West Bank.
Right, like the occupied territories of Palestine.
I know. I should know more about this considering I am the chief executive officer.
Yeah.
But
this was your idea, Matt.
I assume all of your ice cream books are behind all of those wrestling VHS tapes on that bookshelf.
That's right. That's right. They're slowly melting. The the most insane thing was a guy tweeted a picture of the actual Ben and Jerry's Matt McCarthy and photoshopped in a copy of Mein Kampf that he was holding in his hand.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Okay.
To which, I mean, that's
pretty extreme.
That was like the beginning of it. And that guy I just replied to, and I was like, cool. I'm a Los Angeles based comedian.
Yeah. Chill.
Because I'm not fucking around with any of this. Like, I don't need to be involved in anything.
Mein Kampfy?
Yeah, I don't need to be involved in centuries-old religious wars.
Yeah.
Are you sure?
The man is just trying to do high bass in your face and get people to laugh.
But Matt, you have don't you have a wrestling podcast? The art form that chronicles the oldest of disputes.
This is true. Yeah.
Flair versus Macho.
That's right.
That's true.
Steen versus Generico. You know what I'm saying?
Well, look at this. This is the best part about talking to podcasters. Perfect segue, Mr. Hastings.
What?
So last week we discussed at great length one of the founding figures of Memphis Wrestling. We did a whole episode on Sputnik Monroe.
Fascinating.
Which is an insane story. That was last week's episode. This week we're doubled up here. I got two wrestling and comedy experts here to talk about the Memphis territory. And now we want to move into the classic era of Memphis wrestling. And we're talking about the 1970s and the 1980s and maybe a little peek into the extra weird 1990s if time allows.
I actually have a friend named Sputnik Monroe, and he gets a lot of weird tweets.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, the water fountain should be separate. What are you talking about?
What's with this skunk-like hair, you son of a bitch?
And he's like, I'm a lobster fisherman from Maine. I'm not...
My dad liked Russian literature. That's why I have that name. God damn it.
Well, I guess we'll, kind of start, there's two Jerrys at the center of the story. There's an on-camera Jerry and a mostly off-camera Jerry.
And both of those Jerry's, Jerry Lewis. I hope you guys, I know you didn't know that.
Yeah, one is,
Right.
One is Jerry Lee Lewis, the other is Jerry Lewis.
Exactly, yeah. The plot of the bellhop is a perfect metaphor for what happened with Memphis wrestling.
As far as the era that we're concerned with, the late 1970s through the, pretty much all of the 80s, Memphis wrestling largely revolves around the figure of one Jerry the King Lawler. He is going to be pretty much involved either in front of the screen or definitely behind the screen in most of the stuff that I figure we'll all end up talking about today. So let's talk Jerry Lawler, and we'll start, I guess, with Matt McCarthy. Do you have a favorite Lawler angle from this territory, from this time period?
I mean, aside from Andy Kaufman?
I'm totally prepared to talk Kaufman, so if you want to start with that one, that is definitely something I want to talk about.
I mean, that might be like the greatest feud in the history of wrestling,
Yeah,
it's also so important because of the impact of it, and also because it's one of the few very important things in modern wrestling history that didn't happen in a ring owned by Vince McMahon. Like, it was completely and totally independent of any of the still prominent wrestling families.
And funny enough, Kaufman grows up on Long Island and grows up specifically watching WWF, which is Vince's dad's New York territory, and loving it. And he apparently approached Vince Sr. then Vern Gagne, and then was finally referred, I think through Bill Apter, to Jerry Jarrett and Jerry Lawler down in Memphis. But I believe Vince Sr.'s quote when Kaufman approached him about possibly participating in the WWF was, Mr. Kaufman, we are not trying to bring show business into our business, which is hilarious considering what that organization has turned into today.
I'd like to picture like Vince Jr. in the background while his dad's on the phone, just like, God damn it, Dad!
What are you doing?
It's so interesting. On my, and I can't believe I'm about to say this and I apologize, my podcast, we did a year-long saga of reviewing every moment of Vince McMahon's life. And there's two formative moments that literally shaped his entire career, and it is the Andy Kaufman feud not coming to the WWF and Billy Graham getting the belt taken off of him, and you can see that form his entire worldview of wrestling.
Interesting.
Because he was president and working for the company of both of those things, would have heard about it, but didn't have the power at the time to say yes to them, watch them go be big successes, and or, in the case of Superstar Billy Graham, Bob Backlund be a giant failure. And so that he's just, those are the two moments he's seen his dad, who he clearly thinks is the son, make the mistake. So he's just like, always do the opposite of those two things. Always get a celebrity, always go with the muscly blonde white man. That's the plan.
The other big thing was Vince Sr. told Hulk Hogan, "You're a wrestler, not a movie star."
Oh, yes, he did.
You're not allowed to do Rocky 3.
Yes.
Oh, my God.
He did.
Yeah.
Wow. That turned out to be...
And Hulk Hogan listened to him and never became the big star that we don't know.
That's right.
Yeah.
Never showed up on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
You know what? Well,
Never.
Thank goodness now Vince is not repeating the mistakes of his father and is changing with the times.
Yeah.
I guarantee if Andy Kaufman had walked through the door now with this plan, Vince McMahon Jr. would say no, based purely on the fact that Andy Kaufman is quote unquote too small to be a wrestler, even though at this point he's probably taller than most world champions.
That's hilarious. Well, he would have, if it was today, he would not do it because like it started with Andy was wrestling women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they won't do anymore on WWE television violence from a man onto a woman. Used to not be a problem.
Oh my God. The attitude. I'm playing No Mercy on my Twitch stream right now, and you have to go in and change it from intergender battle royals, because if not, your fourth person coming out is the fabulous Moolah every time. And
So funny.
it's just like, this is a game for kids, and what we're saying is, if a woman's old and she's in the ring, beat the fuck out of her.
That's right.
Welcome to the WWF.
Yeah. It's interesting because I kind of spent the past couple of days reviewing all the footage and stuff like that, and listening to I just found out that Jerry Jarrett had a podcast at some point where he
Good Lord.
He's got his own, not quite the talent that Conrad Thompson is, but his own Conrad type figure to kind of lead him through his discussion. And one of the things that he repeated over and over was how much everybody liked the guy and Andy Kaufman and how he got along with pretty much everybody there. And so I think, I don't know, I'd like to think that maybe if it was in today's context, you could, because there's a lot of people at WWE who are still there just because they are very well liked backstage and they kind of, maintain a good mood, it seems like, more so than they actually get used. So I don't know. He might be an R-Truth type figure that they just won't ever relinquish, perhaps.
It's very possible. I think it's also that thing of Andy Kaufman had to have been nice because he was a dickhead comedian weirdo in the 70s, and I guarantee all those cokey stand-up comedians would have bashed his head in for going up and just pretending he had a booger on his face for 40 minutes and then doing an Elvis impression. I guarantee Andy Kaufman was charming as fuck. Because the thing is that's important to remember, to Matt's point, how Andy Kaufman broke into the business with this angle, for those who don't know, is he pitched to various wrestling territories. At the time, wrestling was divided into territories. Hey, I'm going to come in, and I am going to be an obnoxious heel like Gorgeous George or the Grand Wizard, who were very prominent wrestling figures from his childhood. I'm going to be a squealing loser bitch I'm going to beat up your female stars and then have your big main baby face, who's the hero of your territory, come in, cripple me, and we'll make it this big angle. And only in Memphis do they decide to do that.
Right. Well, and that kind of goes perfectly into, the fact that like Memphis was this place that was wrought with, experimentation, for lack of a better thing. And Jerry Jarrett, in this interview where he was talking about Kaufman, was kind of talking about his booking philosophy or whatever. And he's basically like, I came from the street and I had real fights and, something like that. A little pipsqueak guy mouthing off to the bigger dude was the thing you would see in the street. So he's like, I actually find that to be somewhat more believable than two huge dudes rolling around in the ring for like 30 minutes. And that was so funny to hear him say that too, because you're like, oh, that sort of explains everything. I think if that's really his take and not some, revisionist history that he's built up in his mind, that kind of does explain the Memphis territory in a way where you're like, oh yeah, he is just, straight gimmicks, and not that it's a commitment to realism necessarily, but at least it's, he'd rather something sort of pithy and exciting than, just a hard slugging it out kind of thing that was indicative of the other territories.
Should we quickly explain just who Jerry Lawler and Jerry Jarrett are, just for everyone listening, just so then, because to tell the Andy Kaufman story, it's important just to have it understood. So Andy Kaufman from Taxi, very famous sort of alternative comedian.
The OG, some would say.
Jerry Jarrett, how would we explain Jerry Jarrett?
He was the promoter in the Memphis territory.
Yeah, he's a second-generation promoter. The Memphis territory was run by his mom and a guy named George Goulas. Long story short, Jerry Jarrett took over the company from his mom, kicked out Nick Goulas, who wanted to promote his son George Goulas as the face of the wrestling territory. The reason why Jerry Jarrett could do that is Jerry Jarrett had befriended this hot, young, sober babyface who had never been wrestle trained and only liked Coca-Cola and doing drawings.
Yes.
Named Jerry Lawler, who named himself the other king of Memphis and was at first a heel and then became a babyface. And they took over the territory, took over Tennessee and Kentucky as a wrestling territory under the deal that for 6 months, Jerry booked it. Then 6 months, Jarrett booked it. Then Jerry the King Lawler booked it. And when Jerry the King Lawler booked it, he would then book monsters, mummies, a guy dressed as Bassman, Batman, all this weird shit, because he just wanted to wrestle those bad guys.
Yeah.
And then Jerry Jarrett had to come in and be like, they all worked for Jimmy Hart, and they're all men who work down by the docks or whatever. Fuck you, Jerry the King Lawler, you piece of shit.
His podcast where he's explaining the reason for doing that is he was just like, I'll just get tired. I'd get tired. I'd have to go down to my home in Florida, and I'd say, Jerry, you handle it. And that was what
that's his explanation. Not what happened. The other thing you should know is Jerry Jarrett no longer, for 20 years, didn't speak to his, or 10 years didn't speak to his son, Jeff. And his reason was Jeff said, well, Dad, you always abandoned me. For example, in this case, Jerry had left the company him and his son started and immediately went to their main competitor to give them just a wrestler. And Jerry's excuse was, I've been married to the woman I cheated on your mom with for 40 years. Don't say I run away. Which, there you go. Welcome to wrestling. Everyone's a monster.
So that's who's running the company when Kaufman comes in. So from what I gather, the angle was that Kaufman was brought in to wrestle women exclusively. He had named himself the intergender wrestling champion. He used to wrestle women at the Improv, like not 2 miles down the street from us and stuff like that. Would take on.
He used to do it. Yeah, he used to do it in his live act. He was doing it on Saturday Night Live.
Yes,
there's a great book called Dear Andy Kaufman, I Hate You, where it's just a collection of letters. They asked for submissions from the audience of women to include like a letter and a picture.
It's fantastic.
To wrestle Andy on TV. And then it all culminated in a vote of, I think it was definitely an audience vote of like, do we let Andy Kaufman come back to SNL or is he banned from life? And they voted to ban him from life. And this is back when stipulations mattered. And he left the show and he never showed up on SNL ever again.
Holy shit.
Now, during the next hour, we're going to be counting this vote. And I want you to remember that this show is live. It's Saturday night, and we're doing this for real. Andy Kaufman's career at Saturday Night Live is in your hands. Now, I happen to think that Andy Kaufman is a comedic genius. Now, if you agree with me, call 1-900-720-4101. However, if you think Andy is not funny anymore, if you've seen enough of his wrestling women, the Mighty Mouse bits, the phony injuries, the stupid, unfunny hoaxes, if you've had enough of this loudmouth, call 1-900-720-4202. You can call as many times as you'd like, but remember, each call is going to cost you 50 cents. That's the way the phone company works. But remember, a man's career at Saturday Night Live is on the line. We're very serious, so if you're a Kaufman fan, like me, you want to see him on the show, 1-900-720-4101. But if you hate his guts and you want to see his career here flush down the toilet, call 1-900-720-4202. Call now. You've got an hour. Andy Kaufman's fate is in your hands.
There is a video of him, and it's after the pile driver because he's still wearing the neck brace, so it must have been 82 or 83, where he's on SNL basically apologizing to the city of Memphis.
That's right. Right. That's when they think they did that vote.
Oh, so that was his appeal to not get kicked off?
If you watch the appeal to Memphis, if you watch carefully, he's not being very, like, he's like, I'm sorry you smell bad and you have terrible teeth. That's not my fault. Like, it's... From purely being a bad guy on television, Andy Kaufman was phenomenal because he's such a pipsqueak bag of shit. And I think Jerry Lawler comes across terribly always. Like, I just don't think he has the vibe of a hero. He always has a goatee. He's smarmy as fuck. He shows too much chest hair to be a good guy.
Yeah,
he looks like a corrupt cop. And next to Andy Kaufman, you're like, would someone smack this thin Kaufman fuck?
I honestly... I'm trying to remember if Lawler might have been a heel, actually. This might have even him getting involved with Andy might have been a babyface turn because he always went back and forth, you know.
Oh yeah, I forgot where I was even going with that. Yeah, but he appeared in Memphis and would quote unquote take on all comers, and Lawler began training a lady to beat Kaufman. And so the lady was wrestling on Lawler's behalf, and Andy beat her and then started shit-talking Jerry. So he was like, you threw me your best, Lawler, you couldn't do it, and stuff like that. And that is when that feud became sort of a one-on-one.
And I don't know why Jerry Lawler's getting his nose into it. He has nothing to do with this, and he's saying, let's give him another 3 minutes. He should keep his nose out of my business.
I had agreed to be in Foxy's corner and give her pointers during the match. And here was a guy who they obviously didn't like because of the things he had said about women. And Andy Kaufman, after already pinning her, had her down, rubbing her face in the mat. And there's 10,000 people hollering, hey, Jerry, get in there and do something.
And that's the first time they ever got physical. They kind of shoved each other, and the crowd went apeshit, and they were like, I think we got something here. And that was the impetus to start the feud.
It's also that interesting thing of it shows how small but how big the world is, and that it's the idea of this sort of made this territory. This is a historical moment building towards this match where a guy in a terry cloth robe who appeared on Taxi is going to physically fight a guy who loves Twinkies who's going to ride a horse to the ring. Like, it's so weird in context what actually this built to, but this was like front page news in Tennessee. And I'm sure that there were some people being like, this gentleman from New York is coming to the South and he's going to get his teeth kicked in. That's how we do things in Tennessee.
And he was goading that on.
Of course he was.
211.
So the videos of the Man from Hollywood, videos that Andy was doing were some of the fucking funniest, most obnoxious performances you can imagine.
Did you ever watch that? Because they used to play them on Comedy Central. They had this like documentary about Andy Kaufman, and a big part of it was they would show the wrestling stuff. And I remember my dad was the one who showed me this. He was like, "Come in here and watch this," and it made my dad laugh. Like the only other time I've seen my dad laugh that hard is we sat and watched about 10 episodes of Nathan For You. And those are the two hardest times I've ever seen my dad laugh, was watching Andy Kaufman go, "You dumb hicks, why don't you go plow the field, you hicks?"
Yeah.
And that
at one point he did a demonstration on how to use toothpaste
Yes.
and how to use
I
body
have seen
soap.
this. The soap one is the one that's so fucking demeaning. Like, it's just so inappropriate.
It's incredible.
he's like, this is soap, not soap. Soap. You rub it under your arms and get rid of that pig smell.
Oh, and I would like to mention the reason that I want to tell you about soap. When I travel around the South, a lot of fans, a lot of wrestling fans, they recognize me from TV. They always put out their hands. They want to shake my hand. And I'll tell you something, it disgusts me. The hands are so slimy. You people, your hands are so greasy and slimy. I mean, I don't want to shake them. You ask me for an autograph, I'll sign you an autograph. But please, don't put out your hand and shake it until you can wash your hands. Now, this is what you do. Wet your hands, okay? Then wet the soap. Wash the soap, rub it on your hands, and rub it around, and your hands will get clean. Another thing is a shower. You turn on the water, wet your body, let the water wet your body, wet the soap, rub the soap all over your body till your body is clean. Okay? Then you rinse, and this is very important now. Don't come out of the shower with the soap still on. Very important, you've got to rinse the soap off. Okay? You rinse it off, you dry with a towel, and you're clean as a whistle. And then you can shake my hand. Okay, now that's my tip for this week. This is about soap. I will see you next week with another tip. Okay? Bye.
Just unbelievable. And there's my favorite thing about watching any old wrestling. I mean, when they cut to the crowd, particularly the old ladies that sit near the end, they are like, if they had the ability to shoot that man dead, they would. Like, they are just like...
Well, this is the amazing thing about Southern Territory Wrestling, is the reason why they don't have the ability to shoot that man dead is they had to search everyone for weapons.
Right. And leave your pitchforks at the door.
Tennessee wasn't that bad for it, but right next door in Louisiana, like, it was quite a famous thing of, you have heat when the local police department's coming to your hotel room and giving you a bulletproof vest, because they're like, listen... We can't search everyone for guns in Bowling Green, so you're just going to have to wear a bulletproof vest and hope they don't aim for the head.
Yeah. Well, and I should point out, like, the Mid-South Coliseum, not 20 years earlier, was the site of the Beatles' first show after the John Lennon "We're bigger than Jesus" comment, at which point the entire Tennessee...
What a terrible idea.
The entire Tennessee Ku Klux Klan showed up at that show to protest.
Wow.
So, we're only 20 years out from that. That's like, if this happened in, 2001 for those listening that are that old.
Do you think...
I mean, I like the idea that the Beatles are playing and the Klan is outside protesting. You want to talk about white privilege?
Yeah.
Hey, man, we got some signs. We don't like what he said.
Also, I like to put myself in the shoes of a guy who's like really Christian but not racist and shows up as like, hey, am I on the wrong side of this?
I just like the idea that I guarantee about 80% of those Klan members just tell that story of the time I went to a Beatles concert. They do not mention why they were there.
No, I didn't go inside, but that's for reasons I will not disclose.
It was very warm and I could not hear the band. Part of the reason was I was outdoors. Now, ask me no more questions. Shoot.
But yeah, I read that little tidbit about the Mid-South Coliseum and I was like, God damn, dude, that's so crazy. What a horrible gig to have the next day after.
I'm going to say this right now. The Beatles should have looked at better management. That is not a time to play south of the Mason-Dixon. You know what I'm saying? That's just you know what? We're just going to reschedule that gig.
Yeah.
We're the Beatles. As it turns out, we're not going to need the money.
This is true.
I bet you in their defense, though, they had to have been, because how many Beatles concerts did they do in Liverpool when they were starting out that ended in fistfights?
Oh, that's true.
All of them.
Oh, yeah.
I've been to Liverpool,
Probably
Matt.
all of them.
And by the way, most of the concerts in Liverpool were in the daytime. They played at noon.
Yeah, matinee shows for the kids. Yeah.
And I guarantee by 2 p.m. there was two guys beating the fuck out of each other, being like, "It's not love me, Sue. It's love me, do, you prick."
But yeah, no, that Kaufman thing ends up. I'm really struggling to think of anything that's even like comparable in the modern day where it was that culturally ubiquitous, at least in the comedy world, where it's like it's on Saturday Night Live regularly. They're talking about this. Obviously, the David Letterman thing, which is
for those who don't know, the David Letterman thing is Andy Kaufman and Jerry Lawler appear together. They only when the movie Man on the Moon came out did they acknowledge that this was fake. Which was Andy Kaufman and Jerry Lawler supposed to apologize to each other. Andy Kaufman gets worked up and throws water in Jerry's face, and then Jerry Lawler literally slaps Andy Kaufman out of his fucking chair while wearing such an open shirt.
Oh, I love his outfit, man. That's tight red pants.
And David Letterman just sits there confused.
Letterman looks... I mean, if it's acting, it's good acting. Letterman looks pretty, like, freaked out.
Someone pointed out, by the way, and I always thought this was great, for Man in the Moon, David Letterman just showed up right after shooting his show and shot it in 3 takes, and Lorne Michaels demanded 3 hours of makeup, so he looked like he did in 1981. Bear in mind, Lorne Michaels was not working at SNL when Andy Kaufman was on. That's the other thing.
That's right.
Yeah,
that one. I'm sure you guys have seen that Jim Carrey the documentary about him making that movie, Andy and Me.
Yes, not a fan personally.
No, it makes him look so bad.
Oh, he's such a jackass.
Yeah. It's what's good is watching it a second time, that documentary, because the first time you're like, I think Jim Carrey's lost his mind, and then the second time you're just like, oh, this is what happens when for 10 years you're just given $20 million a year and no one says no to you. Where you're just like, you know what people need to hear from me? My spiritual philosophy. I, the man who talked out of his butt.
Yeah, I think it was in it was one of the books on Johnny Carson. One of the segment producers wrote a tell-all like at the end of the 70s. And in it, it talks about that phenomenon of movie stars would come on The Tonight Show and not understand why they weren't killing, because they didn't know that they weren't funny, because they were on set all day with everyone laughing at everything they said.
Oh yeah.
Shit.
Yeah.
And then they would tell these anecdotes on Carson and it would die. And they were like, what is like... Yeah. That's what it reminded me of, listening to Jim talk. I'm like, oh, you are so deep in this bubble. You have no clue what an asshole you sound like.
Yeah. One of my favorite things, when Stone Cold first started his podcast, he did a 2-part episode with Jerry Lawler, and the second part is Stone Cold's just like, all right, I want to talk about Andy Kaufman, he's one of my favorite comedians, and he just like gets him to go, and Lawler starts talking about filming Man on the Moon, and basically Jim Carrey had pissed him off so fucking bad that when they went to film that scene, Jim was like, all right, Jerry, I want you to hit me as hard as you can, for real. And Jerry Lawler was basically like, no problem. And so the hit that you see in that movie is Jerry Lawler hitting actor Jim Carrey as hard as he can. And in the podcast, he claims he's like, oh, I hit him harder than Kaufman, way harder. I actually liked Andy.
It was in Variety or something like that, because I was such a wrestling and comedy fan as a teenager when that movie came out, and that incident got reported because Jim Carrey needed to go talk to a doctor because he got fucking slapped in the ear really hard. Yeah. And Jerry Lawler, like, to Hollywood Reporter, whatever journalist, because Jerry Lawler the smartest wrestler is still kind of unaware of who he should and shouldn't tell things to. Says, I remember reading it being like, yeah, Jim Carrey was pissing me off, so I slapped the shit out of him. I'm a wrestler after all. And you're like, Jerry, come on, bro. Like, what do you think? Like, you do know that that's assault. You just admitted to assault. You are so lucky it's the 90s and we look the other way on all of this for another solid 18 years. You have bought yourself another 18 years of bad behavior.
But yeah, that feud, it doesn't really, I mean, it keeps going after this, but like the big height of it, at least in the ring, is in April of 82 when Jerry Lawler delivers the devastating pile driver to Andy Kaufman. And the way he sells it, I mean, he legitimately like plays dead. Like he looks like he has expired. And just to watch that sell job is something, it's a beautiful thing.
They got an ambulance, and the way Lawler tells the story is he's like, he doesn't need an ambulance. We have to pay for it. And he's like, the referee goes over, comes back, says, Andy says he'll pay for it.
Yeah. We got to give these people what they want.
Yeah. I mean, then it's, then it turns into what it, the most obvious place where now we have a wrestler who's going to wrestle on Andy's behalf. He's joined forces with Jimmy Hart. I think if Andy hadn't died and gotten so sick, he would have probably quit acting altogether and just became a wrestling personality.
Do you think so?
Absolutely.
I kind of do, especially
interesting.
Based on like I said, I'm now gonna have to go back and listen to every episode of it because it was just so fascinating. The Jarrett podcast, but that was one of the things.
He for sure, he definitely didn't enjoy doing Taxi, and he didn't enjoy doing the foreign man character anymore.
Right,
and the thing that he was fascinated with was doing the who's the heel persona he would do.
Oh, Tony Clifton. Yeah.
Right. And now it's like, now he actually gets to do Tony Clifton without putting on any makeup. Because even by that point, because if Vince Jr. had, he would have scooped up Andy, because Andy wanted to be in New York anyway. He wanted to be in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
But the best part is the feud continued even after Andy's death, because Jimmy Hart comes out and talks to Lance Russell and says, Andy Kaufman has brain cancer. And as everybody knows, this is exactly what he says. He goes, as everybody knows, the way you get cancer is by getting a bump or a bruise.
No.
Yes.
And everybody saw it when Jerry Lawler pile drove Andy Kaufman. He landed on his head. So Jerry Lawler, you gave Andy Kaufman brain cancer and you killed him. It's
a very close and personal friend of mine, Andy Kaufman, is dying of cancer. I know you laugh about it. Go ahead, you laugh. You people are sick. I'm not gonna laugh. But let me tell you what, the man who can't sleep at night is Jerry Lawler. How can Jerry Lawler go to bed at night thinking about what he did to this man? Because everybody knows 5 ways of cancer, baby. 5 ways. And the number 1 way of catching cancer is when you get a bruise or a lump on you, man. That's cancer. And he's got cancer of the brain, and that is caused from that pile driver that Jerry Lawler... Don't go all, Jimmy. You know it's caused about it. Because of the pile driver, Lawler, you gave Andy Kaufman cancer, and he is dying, baby, and that is the fact. But it's going to be payback for you.
That is just the height of the art of professional wrestling.
I love it. I love everything about this. What I also like is Andy Kaufman, I guarantee, was in his hospital bed just like, they'll fucking remember me, baby.
Yeah,
like, hell yeah.
And also, I for sure had lung cancer, too. That's the best part.
Wasn't even the right cancer. Of course, Lance Russell with his awesome newscaster, stupid anchor hair.
Yeah.
So dry, yet so much spray.
Yeah. Well, there's almost like a little, maybe not a callback, but a similar situation after Paul Bearer passed away, and they kind of they sort of insinuated that his ashes were inside the Undertaker's urn during the CM Punk feud.
They did not insinuate,
or they said as much.
As much, and then they had
that's true.
A man who what I've learned about wrestling is if you get a guy who doesn't drink or do drugs, they're gonna make him do some real weird shit with a dead body, and evidently that's the move.
But it was so funny when that was going down, because now we have Twitter. Now we have the instant reaction machine. And there were so many people just being like, how dare they disrespect this man? I'm like, do you think for 1 second that Paul Bearer, Percy Pringle II, wasn't laughing his ass off somewhere on the other side of the veil, if that is such a thing? Like, I couldn't think of a person who would approve more of using their mortal remains in a wrestling angle than that guy, except for maybe Andy Kaufman.
Speaking as a wrestling fan, the one that I always find it funny that they always go to the Paul Bearer one, and no one ever talks about how was it Paige or AJ Lee that just evoked the name of Reed Flair against Charlotte.
Oh, it was sure. Yeah. I think it was Paige. Yeah,
and
that was fucked up.
That was the one where even wrestling fans were like, bro, for those of you who don't know, Reed Flair,
Ric Flair's son,
did a bit of the old overdosed on heroin in the room next to his own father.
Yeah.
And was discovered by his father. It was a very tragic situation.
You know what, Charlotte? You're wrong, sweetheart. Because your little baby brother, he didn't have much fight in him, did he?
Oh, come on. That was uncalled for. There's no reason for Paige to go there.
And that's the only time when wrestling fans were like, if we could just tone that down just a touch, that would be appreciated.
Right. I think,
But any other time, it's just like, yeah, like when Matt was describing that Lance Russell was like, and so Andy Kaufman had cancer, Jerry the King Lawler gave it to him. I'm surprised that like they didn't have that written in glitter on a jacket Jerry Lawler wore for most of the 90s.
Oh man, yeah. And Lance Russell, by the way, who is the consummate announcer of the Memphis territory, I believe started off at the news station, correct?
They all did. So
he was still doing it.
Yeah. He also did the news.
So, but the thing is that all of those wrestling shows, so throughout the United States, every area had its own wrestling territory. Whatever was the home city of that wrestling territory, they'd get the newscaster or the sportscaster to be the voice of it because they were just in the studio anyway. So just get the guy that's there, come over here and ask fucking Thunderbolt Patterson what he's going to do to Michael P.S. Hayes. Like, it's just, it makes all the sense in the world, which is why you get people that are very much not committed to wrestling, but trying to make it look legitimate because they just know how to call baseball.
Yeah.
So they're going to call this the same way.
Yeah, and Lance Russell, I mean, still considered one of the greats, and he's just a guy who just kind of like he was there and he could talk, so they handed him a mic and let him do it.
Also, Lance Russell does an excellent line in really acting like he dislikes the Savage family when Macho Man Randy Savage comes in. There's some promo where Macho Man Randy Savage won't show his face to the camera and then runs off, and then Lance Russell just dead down the barrel just goes, "The intensity, I can feel it." And you're like, I don't think you can feel it at all. I don't think you can feel anything, Lance. I think you're dead.
That pile driver, he also checked himself in the hospital. So in case the citizens of Memphis were to go up there and ask, he would have been indeed shown that he was in traction in the hospital.
I absolutely love it. I love
so committed.
The Memphis territory is great because it's goofy and stupid. It also never leaves the Tennessee, Kentucky area.
Right.
Ever. Like every other territory either got closed or expanded. This one just stayed in like 8 cities. And
yeah, isn't it? Well, it's like Memphis, Louisville, and then like Evansville, Indiana, or something like that.
Memphis, Knoxville, never Nashville for some reason.
They probably had their own thing.
Yeah, Memphis, Knoxville, Evansville, Bowling Green, Louisville. Am I missing any of the others? Like, and then just like weird spot shows.
Yeah, and these guys just had to do that loop
every week,
every single week, which seems mind-numbing. But they made it work.
And every Monday they were at the Mid-South Coliseum, and I mean, it's like how many weeks in a row was it sold out?
Yeah,
it's incredible.
It's absolutely incredible.
Well, it was it not like decades or a decade? Like it was an unconscionable amount of Monday because it was Mondays there, and then Tuesday at the Louisville Gardens, and both of those were sold out forever.
Yeah, at least 10 years straight. But yeah,
but like the longevity of it too, the fact that they didn't get burned out because like on Lawler, especially because before him, Jackie Fargo was a whole different phenomenon. And then once you get into the Lawler era, he was the top guy into the 90s until they finally, had to like the fact that territory lasted as long as it did and they never got burned out. Like Jerry Lawler had his own talk show at the same time.
He's like Robert De Niro in Casino.
Yeah.
Right. And they just didn't get burned out on it. It somehow stayed fresh through the whole thing. It's pretty incredible.
Well, and it should be noted, Lawler in I think last year had his 50th anniversary show where he fought in a cage match and rode to the ring on a horse and shit, and they had a giant baseball stadium and stuff like that. So, I mean, this continues. I know WWE does not allow Jerry in the ring anymore because he almost had a almost fatal heart attack. Yes. Yeah, he died for a few minutes, and they were like, "Okay, maybe not," but that did not stop that man. He can't be stopped in Memphis. He's still doing it.
If ever you want a fun trivia question, what do Jerry Lawler and Nick Gage have in common?
2 men.
You might be surprised.
I'm going to say it. 2 men that both died in the ring, technically.
There you go.
Here's the sad thing. I bet you they have more. They've both been definitely investigated by the Memphis Police Department. I'd give that. And also, hilariously, both have run for mayor of the towns they've lived in.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Bear in mind, Jerry Lawler, just because Jesse Ventura became the governor of Minnesota, ran for mayor of Memphis and came 4th.
Yeah. That's pretty impressive.
And he didn't have a platform. Like, Jesse was at least coming as a mayor from a different place, had a political platform. Jerry, I think, was just like, I'm the king.
I'm Jerry.
Yeah, and they're like, that's a fair point. Give that man some votes.
Yeah.
But so do you know, so Jerry Lawler was this like 20-year star in this territory that basically came out of nowhere and was given the spot by Jackie Fargo, who was and also a perennial sellout star in these 8 cities for 15 years. Because it was Sputnik Monroe to Jackie Fargo, right?
Right, and then Jackie and his brother were a tag team, and then Jackie became the star. And then when the Goulas split happened, I think Jackie might have been working for Goulas, and then Jarrett had Lawler. And then once you get into the 80s, then it's kind of, you get into the Lawler thing of like, you know, somewhat similar to the Hogan thing, which was the way that the old man booked Bruno. It was like Monster of the Month. Like, who's he fighting this month? And like you mentioned many times with Lawler, it was literally, what monster is he fighting this month? He's wrestling Frankenstein this week.
Yeah. There's a Frankenstein, a mummy, and then a guy that they intimate is a half of a spider. I believe that those are the 3 big boys.
But then what's so interesting too is like, because you have Lawler, he's also a heel part of the time as well, and still drawing on top, which is fascinating, because then you're building up. I guess what I'm trying to get to is then you get into like, so the other Lawler feuds that are probably the best are, you get into like with Eddie Gilbert, probably the best one after Andy is then with Austin Idol and Tommy Rich.
Yeah.
Because then that culminates in like what was it, like a hair versus hair in a cage match?
It's 1987 hair versus hair in a cage that starts a fucking riot.
Right, which Lawler lost.
Yeah.
Now, like, they're in the cage, and it's a matter of how do we get from the safety of this steel cage through the crowd, because there's no barriers, there's no ring. It's insane to me watching some of that stuff. And then get to the dressing room, because I forget who some ECW guy in an interview was talking about advice he got from Terry Funk. And that the one thing Terry Funk said to him was, you won't know that you've been stabbed until you're in the car driving away from the arena.
It was Shane Douglas and Tommy Dreamer were told it at the same time. And what's even crazier is then Terry Funk showed them how to check for stab wounds while having adrenaline in your body, which is such a weird thing for an old man to be like, I've had this enough times. And I remember it's a shooting because he shows with his hand, he's like, you make a flat palm and you rub down your torso and he's like, that will actually show if you're bleeding. And it was from that, and I think it's Tommy Rich who was in that riot. It's Tommy, but no, it's not. It's Austin. It's definitely Austin Idol, because Austin Idol was the famous referee watch the hair. That was like his whole thing, was he would always complain to the referee about his opponent grabbing his hair, which was the impetus for the hair versus hair match.
No, it's Idol, and the funny.
It's such a long program, because it starts. It's Idol and Lawler. And Tommy Rich, he left at one point and then came back. And at a certain point in the feud, Rich turns heel on Lawler, and then it becomes Idol and Rich against Lawler. And there's just, if you ever want to fucking laugh your ass off, watch some Austin Idol promos, because that guy was absolutely one of the best. And then everybody ripped him off. And he's like, one of the promos they do too is he just starts he goes on a tangent, like he's running down Lawler, and then he goes on a tangent about what a goof Hulk Hogan is. and how he stole his whole act. He's like, yeah, he used to be down here in Memphis, then he stole my whole act and went to New York. And Tommy Rich, he just bends over and starts laughing his head off on the show. That was like a blood feud that the people went absolutely bonkers for.
It's crazy because, like, you know, I've seen those clips and stuff, but it really wasn't until, like, you know, like watching this stuff and research and stuff for this episode that you're like, 1987, to think like how hot that was in 1987, and then cut to just 10 years later, and Jerry the King Lawler, when I became aware of him, when I started watching wrestling when I was like 12, was just the ringside guy, and I had no fucking idea that like 10 years earlier this man started, you know, him just getting repeatedly kicked by Austin Idol caused the people of Memphis to get into a violent frenzy. And the end of that clip, because the YouTube clips honestly cut out right before the shit hits the fan. So if there's anybody listening that can maybe direct me, I know Matt is the king of physical media. Perhaps you have this tape, but the stuff that's on YouTube ends as they're exiting the ring, and you can see that because like Matt said, there's no barriers, there's no like entrance way. Like, these people come absolutely unhinged, and then the clip just ends. So I'm like dying to see if they kept it rolling, or if just for the sake of, like, you know, community standards on television they had to cut it. But like, it's dangerous. It is a very scary situation when Paul Heyman, Paulie Dangerously, and Austin Idol and his crew are like exiting through the crowd. You can just see the people start coming unglued, and it's fucking scary looking. And you're like, man, this thing was as real got. Not that long before that guy was, you know, well, that's it, he's dead, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a bunch of compilation tapes of the whole feud, and then I have this from the Gold Label series, Mayhem in Memphis, the Steel Cage hair match.
Whoa, that's it.
Lawler versus Idol. I mean, you gotta love this logo. I don't know if the kids at home can see it.
It's VHS.
It's number 244.
That's a thing of beauty, man. That's one of my favorite things about the We Watch Wrestling podcast is Matt talking about his physical media collection. And I just sit here envious every single week where I'm just like, fuck, I should have kept. There's so much stuff I should have kept.
Where did you even track that down?
That, I think somebody sent that to me.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a really cool thing about Matt's podcast and the fan base is like people are just like, hey, I don't have room for this. Do you want it? And just sort of send it over to Matt. So he's become the archivist in many ways.
A lot of it is like I've managed to touch a lot of people who are like, I don't want this anymore. My wife is going to kill me if she sees this stuff. But I can't let it go into a landfill. Yeah. And so most of the stuff, if not all of the stuff, it's less of a gift and more of I need this to have a good home. Yeah. I need someone who will take care of this. You know, this is a donation to the archive.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that fucking rocks. Yeah, if you got a chance, give that a review. And if there's more riot footage, I want to know about it because that's what I want to see.
Look through.
Because I'm interested to know, because it does the video that's available online does kind of cut right at the moment where shit goes sideways.
And I think it's important to also acknowledge it's a unique but not a wholly surprising thing to happen in this period of time in wrestling. Like in territory wrestling, these fans were invested in that hero wrestler.
Oh yeah.
And when things like they lose, they go fucking crazy. And Jerry Lawler, again, very good at manipulating, creating those moments. There's also this time when in wrestling it was still very much everyone pretended it was totally fake, so you had to protect people because Memphis territory was so powerful, especially in the post McMahon world. When we talk about that, we mean that Vince McMahon of the WWF was expanding nationally, and Memphis was very much part of the resistance to him.
Yeah,
and then like showing up at the super clashes, showing up in like those alliances with like the AWA and the NWA and WCCW, culminating in a bunch of supercards. It meant to, counteract WrestleMania. It never worked because they were all people that inherently didn't trust each other with wild egos. And yet Jerry Lawler was still on top of that card and came across, it was a blood stoppage victory, but he still beat Kerry Von Erich for the AWA title. I think that's the title that they were fighting over. Mm-hmm. And won via blood stoppage, and then Jerry never defended the AWA title because he wasn't going to leave Memphis for the money the AWA was going to give him. So he was just like, fuck you, come get your fucking stupid belt. Which is one of the many times the AWA champion just changed hands because they were like, oh, the old man that runs this company didn't ask the person he made the champion if they wanted it, which is why we're going to put it in the stable hands of one Stan Hansen, a man who half lives in Japan and doesn't give a fuck. Let's see how this ends. Oh, he literally drove over our belt and sent it back to us? Wow, how did we not see this coming? My name's Vern Gagne. My next plan to save my company is to have wrestling matches in front of cardboard cutouts that are not realistic looking.
Right here, Jackson, the universal heartthrob, 242 pounds. The women's pet and the men's regret. But you can't hide no more. And this is the match that I asked for. And you lied to everybody. You said it's the one you asked for. You're a filthy, stinking liar, Lawler. Belt on the line, I'd put anything on the line to get you one-on-one. I'm the one who wanted this one-on-one, Jack. I'm the one who didn't want a partner. I'm the one who wanted to see you face to face, man to man, to find out if there's anything left there. I don't think there is. And on Wednesday night in Evansville, I'm going to take you to the limit, Jack.
With his Southern heavyweight crown on the line, the King against Austin Idol.
Lance, this is a match I've been waiting for a long time. It's just going to be Idol and me. Looking face to face across the ring. You don't have Tommy Rich to hide behind, Idol. It's just going to be you and the King, brother.
I want to talk about the empty arena match. Speaking of, I guess there were no cardboard cutouts, but
love this goddamn match.
Yes, so this actually was brought back to prominence last year when WWE had to run WrestleMania without a crowd, and seemingly every wrestling magazine or online publication,
Bleacher Report and their subsidiaries,
right? They all, I think, they basically all ran some version of a story like, hey, WrestleMania is going to be weird with no crowd this year, but did you know that this is not the first time that wrestling, and it was so funny because it was like, a lot of that came out before WrestleMania actually started. So they were like, hey, this seems like it's going to be weird, but it's worked in the past. And you're like, yeah, but that ad had more of a backstory to it. This is indeed going to be weird. And it was. It was very weird. But back in 1982, Terry Funk and Jerry the King Lawler had an empty arena match because I believe the angle was that Terry Funk said that Jerry was so beloved in Memphis, he could not beat him unless he had the support of the people. And so to prove that, they had an empty arena match that ended with... does anyone want to take the ending, or should I say it?
I don't know how it ends.
Oh, it ends with...
I just know it's so long.
It's extremely long. They fight...
They had to verbally say, I quit.
Yes.
I think I have a feeling I know how this
And so Lawler... Like at some point, like a piece of wood got broken off, and then Lawler is gouging Funk's eye out of its socket.
That's right.
He finally
says, "I quit."
Yeah. Well, after screaming,
Oh, this is the Lawler.
My eye!
This is the Lawler, you dirty dog. My eye, you dirty dog.
Yeah. Well, my favorite part of this is just
oh my god,
the beginning. Even before the match is they have fake B-roll.
I've seen this.
Yeah.
Where it's Lance Russell in the Mid-South Coliseum talking to Terry, the cameraman, and he's like, "Well, I don't know if this crazy thing is even going to come off, but I mean, we're here, and we should. I just at least want to do an introduction on it, and so if this crazy thing happens, we'll have it." And he takes out the longest cigarette you've ever seen, like a Virginia Slim or something, and he lights the cigarette. He's like, and then Terry's like, all right, well, we're rolling. He's like, oh, all right, well, let me get rid of the cigarette here. And he give me a countdown, and he does the intro. Suddenly he's newscaster Lance Russell voice, and then the next thing we know is that the footage cuts to Funk showing up.
Yes,
and the interaction between Funk and Lance Russell is my favorite pieces of video footage I've ever seen, where Terry Funk is on a tear. He's swearing. They're bleeping out the swearing. And Lance is just like, we want to use some of this footage in case this happens. And, we can't be showing this if you're swearing like that. And Terry Funk just goes, I don't give a shit. And then he just keeps going on. He's like, I'm here. Where's Jerry Lawler? I'm a fool. Jerry Lawler thinks I'm a fool.
I came up here for a purpose to prove some thing. And I'll tell you what I came to prove, that Lawler didn't have the guts. I knew that he wouldn't come in the ring, Lance. You tell me where he is. He wouldn't show up for nothing.
It's just a little after 1 o'clock right now,
Just
anyhow.
so
just watch it, and please try to watch it.
Get his ring in and go ahead and count him out.
I'm not counting. I'm not the referee in this thing.
Count him out.
You asked me to bring the cameras
You count him out of the...
Hey, come on, Terry.
I told you people that Lawler did not have the guts to come down here before an empty arena, and he doesn't. Now you go ahead and count him out. If you don't, I'll count him out.
All right. Well, you just asked us to bring the cameras down. That's what I did. We're here. Now, I'm not a referee.
I'm here.
I know you're
I'm going to
here.
go ahead. Is he under the ring, Lance?
Oh,
Is
he's
Lawler
not under the ring. He hasn't.
Is he up in the stand?
He hasn't shown up
in the
yet.
press box? Where is he?
I don't know where he is.
Enough guts to come down here and meet me in the ring. I'm going to count him out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. He's out. I'm going to go ahead and declare myself the winner right now.
Okay, fine. That's great.
The man was a coward. That he didn't have the guts. That he didn't have anything. That he didn't have the intestinal fortitude. He is a...
All right. Well, listen. Okay, you proved your point on the thing.
Enough.
All right.
I've heard enough of your... Heard enough of from the people of Memphis. I've heard enough about how good this man is supposed to be.
Then finally Lawler shows up, and Lawler is in full Jerry the King Lawler gear. He has the cape, the crown, everything. And it is one of the most nonsensical statements I've ever heard. But Lawler's, as he's walking up, Funk starts screaming at him, Jerry Lawler, look at you, you idiot. Don't you know there's nobody here? Of course he knows that. So then he's like, what do you got in there, Lawler? You got a gun? What do you got, a gun? You bringing a gun to the ring? And Lawler's just like, I don't need a gun for you, Funk. And then they go and they fucking go at it. And it's just, no one had ever done anything like that before. It's absolute madness. The promos leading up to it too, as well. Like Funk, it was Funk's idea. Funk laying out, he's got the contract, laying out the stipulation. God, it's just such a work of art.
Well, it's also because it was the empty arena match. It came from Funk's dad. Was the original Texas Tornado match, which was you had a count of 10 to answer the bell, and they used to do it in front of arena of the 3 hours, and then eventually didn't they start doing Texas Tornado matches no crowd because they didn't know how long they were going to go, and then they just show them on television episodes. There's something like that where it's like a thing with the Funk family of these weird stipulation matches. Then Terry brought it on the road, and for those of you who don't know who Terry Funk the wrestler is, he's noted second-tier bad guy in Roadhouse.
Fuck yes, he is. Check out our Patreon. We talked all about Terry Funk in Roadhouse.
And also is such a fun wrestling personality because basically his way of selling tickets was show up in a place, act like an erratic, weird, drunk cowboy, bleed a lot, leave immediately. Like...
I mean, it worked.
Oh my God.
It was, up until very, very recently, into his 70s, that man was working.
Terry Funk was the Hulk Hogan of ECW. He's the reason why that company worked, and because for their most mainstream of time, it was centered around an old man. Could he do it one more time? And he could. Such a fun figure in wrestling, and also the best, worst promos. Like, how do you feel about your opponent? Let me tell you about this son of a bitch. I'm gonna fucking kill him. Like, you're just like, why? Like,
oh my God, it's one of my absolute favorites because so much of the stuff on WWE Network, you don't get the local promos.
Yeah.
So like, if you can still find stuff on YouTube or, people had like the tape trading, you get the localized promos. And there was one where Funk, they were going to be at the Boston Garden, and this is was he even in WWF for a year?
Oh, it's basically he's there just to basically be on WrestleMania 2, but he's there for 8 months or something like that.
Yeah. He was there for like a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And then he comes. They do the local promo. Jarrett, Jimmy Hart is his manager. And he does the setup. Jimmy Hart does the setup. And then Terry Funk just walks in. He goes, Jimmy Hart just like, this Saturday we're going to be at the Boston Garden and he's going to be fighting the Junkyard Dog. Terry, tell him all about it. Terry walks in. He just throws his branding iron. He goes, if I, by some miracle, could take all the sand from the Sahara Desert and 10,000 cats, I would take those cats, put them in Boston, and those cats would proceed to bury the city of Boston with all that sand because Boston stinks.
That is the definition of a long way to go.
Oh, such a fucking, what a maestro.
Terry Funk just had his birthday recently, and apparently he's not doing so good. But Terry, thinking about you, man. Dear Lord.
Of course he's not doing well. His entire adult life was a clinic in how to get CTE.
Well, not just his adult life, his early life, adult life, and late life as well.
The man's father died because his dad was having a cookout, and that meant him and his friends had a fight on the patio. While smoking, and then his dad had a heart attack, and quote unquote, we didn't know that he needed to go to the hospital. Like
they thought he was kayfabing.
Yeah, that's why why wrestling is so insane. Is that up until basically Vince McMahon realized he needed a corporate structure in the early 2000s. Like the Memphis Territory office, I guarantee, was a blonde man named Jerry and a brunette named Jerry, and someone who cut checks, and that's it. Like this is not a professional setup. Then a man from Texas named Terry shows up, goes, film me fighting that guy in an empty arena, and it'll end with me being stabbed in the eye. We'll make millions. And they were like, yes, we will.
That's so funny you say that about the guy doing the bookkeeping, because in that Jerry Jarrett podcast, there's been this urban legend for years that I haven't been able to see anybody confirm or deny, that Andy Kaufman never cashed any of his wrestling checks because he just loved the business that much. And the guy asks Jerry Jarrett point blank, like, is that true? And Jerry just goes he's like, well, I didn't really mess with the checks. I couldn't even tell you what our balance was at any given time. I was like,
that's not
you're true. The owner of the company.
There's no way that's true.
It's a bad way to run a business.
Yeah, there's also just no way that it's also this weird thing about wrestling promoters. It's the weird things that they think to lie about.
Yes.
And the idea that you'd be like, I never looked at the money of my business, and it's like, you definitely did.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way. You're a terrible person. There's no way you weren't 100% aware of the money.
Yeah, you would go to Florida for 6 months every year to sit on the beach. I'm sure you probably glanced at the ledger.
Like, the reason why they eventually closed this territory was supposedly because Jerry Lawler had some like a rule, which was the corporate account for the territory couldn't ever have less than $100,000 in it. And when it got to about to be $100,000, that's when they closed the territory.
That's the USWA. That's like towards the end there, right? Well, actually, that's a good little segue there too. Thank you. You're hitting fucking threes with the damn segues here today, because I want to talk very briefly about sort of the end of the Memphis territory, which is culminated in the creation of the USWA, which is what were the two? What was it? Was Continental, and what was the other one that kind of combined to make that?
WCCW.
That's right. Which, by the way, I believe Matt and Vince have just started covering WCCW on their homework series on We Watch Wrestling. Towards the end of the 1980s, we get this merger, and they become the USWA, and that is when we get the thing that. This is where we get the most surreal, I would say, because we did have Frankenstein monsters and things like that in the 80s, but nothing can prepare the general public for the Christmas creature.
Oh fuck! I remember the stupid fucking hell the Christmas, because it's also so weird. Is because the USWA also has this weird distinction of its training class includes Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yeah.
Cactus Jack is there in a variety of early forms.
Yeah.
Kane. Undertaker pops in, occasionally injured WWF wrestlers.
Kane
show
was the Christmas creature.
Was Kane the Christmas creature? I thought he was the weirdest character, which is called Unabomb.
Yeah, he was also Unabomb, but he
dressed
was
like the Humongous from Road Warrior.
Yes.
Because what the fuck is going on?
Kane is also the Christmas creature.
Yeah, tell Jerry Lawler about him. I guarantee you Jerry Lawler knows about him. This guy is huge. He comes in all decked out in red, white, and green with the tinsel wrapped around, including the mask. They call him the Christmas creature. But I tell you what, he may be dressed in Christmas colors, but he is certainly not have the Christmas spirit. Yeah, I'm sure Jerry Lawler saw that, Bert Bennett. Christmas creature gets the victory over Trey Keller. Trey had a rough day today.
It's a thing of beauty in the way that The Room is a thing of beauty. We're just like, what the fuck was anybody thinking here? But
it's not anybody. It's one guy.
That's
true.
The
thing. It's Jerry. Jerry Lawler. Let's call Jerry Lawler. So we're in the 90s. This is now when Jerry Lawler is being the most Jerry Lawler. The things he's wrestling against are the Christmas creature and various other odd things. He's the bad guy on WWF television nationally.
Yeah.
Locally, he's a good guy. Vince McMahon is appearing on Memphis television as a bad guy.
Yeah.
Claiming, like, it's so fucking... It's a world within a world within a world within a world. And then for no reason, at the Christmas season, Jerry Lawler fights a big monster who represents Christmas, which doesn't make any sense. Because if it's Memphis... in the 90s, wouldn't you make the bad guy wrestler represent Hanukkah, and then Jerry Lawler could beat Hanukkah in front of all of the Christians?
Well, that's what Kaufman would have been had he lived.
Oh my God, the Christmas creature of Andy Kaufman had lived would have been very inappropriate.
That's so funny.
I think he was supposed to be in the class of 2020. I don't know if he went in, but anyway, at any rate, at some point, WWE Hall of Famer Kane in a green full body leotard, and he's wrapped in tinsel, and he is fighting as the Christmas creature.
He looked like a tree.
Yeah, he looks like a giant Christmas
tree.
He
was basically dressed up like a tree. He looked like Corey Feldman in Gremlins.
Holy shit. What a fucking
I like to think
pull.
Lawler was eating hamburgers and watching Gremlins, and he's like, God damn, that's a good gimmick.
I bet you that's what he was doing. I bet you.
And then Gremlin saw it and was like, let's put Hulk Hogan in the next one.
Oh my God, he is in the next one.
As himself.
Yeah.
New batch, baby.
Oh, man.
That's right. What's his name plays the...
Still not my favorite 80s movie wrestler cameo. That still definitely goes to Highlander. There is no reason for Michael P.S. Hayes to be in that goddamn movie.
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah.
So much posing for no purpose.
Also, like, talk about a brief run in WWF. The fact that they were in, I think, was it at Nassau?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that was in Nassau, but it was like the fact that they got the Freebirds. It was like they were only there like that summer, maybe.
Yeah,
you know,
and
they were in and out.
They chalk up. This is very deep wrestling knowledge, but it's such a funny story. The reason the Freebirds had to leave is because Michael Hayes got confused on which day they were wrestling and smoked too much weed and did too much coke. And told Andre the Giant. So Andre the Giant, while he was all fucked up in the locker room, got Arnold Skolan's attention and went, he's drunk. And then they got in big trouble. Which also, by the way, if you know anything about wrestling, if being accused of being drunk by Andre the Giant can happen, you are fucked up, bro. Like, wow, you are in trouble.
If Andre thinks you've had enough.
Yeah. Like the man that literally, who supposedly drank 4 bottles of wine in an hour, looks at you and been like, you know what? This guy needs to dry out.
Well, that's the story they always told was when Andre got his back surgery, the anesthetologist was very concerned about, you know, how much gas to give him to knock him out. And so they said, Andre, how much does it take for you to get drunk? And he said, usually after the first liter of vodka, I start getting a buzz.
Jeez, fuck. Oh my God.
Insane.
So Andre was in a bad way.
Yeah. So there's I started comedy in Montreal, and Andre the Giant quite famously loved this really old school brothel called Jerry's Bar that was on Bishop Street. It's since burned down. But like people would always talk about if he was popping in as a young man to Montreal or like throughout his run. he would be in this bar, and people would. It was an odd thing because it was run by the mob, so like there was never press to get him coming in and out of the brothel. But it is one of the locations where apparently he was being mocked for being a giant, and he beat up a bunch of guys in front of the bar. They then went up the street to the police station and were like, "A giant attacked us," and then got arrested for drunk and disorderly. But Andre the Giant never appeared in the Memphis territory because he wouldn't appear as the creature they wanted him to, the Jolly Green Giant. That's what Jerry Lawler. He always wanted to beat the advertisement for green beans from the 90s. He's the consummate artist. That's what we have to keep in mind. Is this man always just wanted to be a comic book artist? Yeah.
And it makes everything makes so much more sense when you think of it. I mean, they even had the Ninja Turtles ripoff thing too, as well.
They certainly did have a fucking Ninja Turtle ripoff.
This wrestler right here, Cowabunga, a fan favorite ever since he came into the USWA. Coming this way, let's get a word or two from him as he heads to the ring.
Sick, dude. I have seen some major Brontosaurus dudes in the territory. I'm not going to sit back and watch it, my friend. The Gilberts, the first time they're running around here acting like they own in the wrestling business, owning the USWA, running people over with cars. I hope Eddie Marta doesn't fire him, dude, because I want my shot at him. And Major Wiggins in the territory, dude. Doug Gilbert with a big wig on his head, dude. Major Wiggins.
Cowabunga, that's his opinion of the things that have gone on here today, and I must say I'm in total agreement with exactly what he's saying. He heads to the ring right now and steps in there against Keith Erickson.
It's such a weird time because for wrestling, which is such a weird business but has these odd archetypes of rules, then you have this thing, Memphis, which immediately breaks them and continues to break them forever. The idea you need to rotate out your top star. They never do that. They have basically Jackie Fargo and then Jerry Lawler. Oh, you need to do expand nationally to fight Vince McMahon. They never do that. They literally stay where they are, allow an expansion to draw that in as a way to get talent and money and content. Never expand bigger. Oh, you need to make it as realistic as possible. We will
creature.
Never do that. We will the Christmas creature. Various Beetlejuice characters. One of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Up to 6 Beetlejuices.
Up to 6 different Beetlejuices. What happens if you have a territory wall? You got to crush them. No, you bring in your competition, which is why Macho Man Randy Savage and Lanny Poffo ended up in the Memphis territory giving the weirdest promos ever. They have briefly a territory war, which that means that someone else is trying to take over your wrestling territory. And it was just Lanny Poffo and his 2 sons, Randy and fucking, what the fuck is...
Lanny.
It was Lanny. It's Lanny Poffo and Randy Poffo and their dad.
Angelo.
Angelo
was
yeah.
the dad. Yeah.
Was the dad. Run a wrestling territory briefly in Memphis that gets crushed by Jerry, Jarrett, and all them. And then they bring them into the Memphis territory. And the highlight of that is Randy Savage kept shoplifting in the hopes of getting arrested and acting crazy. That's how they wanted to promote their wrestling territory. I love wrestling. They're all terrible business people.
It's truly a thing of beauty. Well, that is Memphis Wrestling. John Hastings.
What's up, everybody?
Where can people find you on the internet?
Check me on all social medias, The John Hastings. Listen to my wrestling podcast, The Wrestler Review, and check me out on Twitch. I do a show called UTS every day, 2 to 4 Pacific time on Twitch. That's John Hastings Comedy on Twitch. And I'm also starting to play full career mode, WWF No Mercy, the N64 video game.
You can still create a wrestler in that one, can't you?
We are creating a wrestler, and then we're going through the entire career of that wrestler in the career mode. Please join us.
When I used to play that as a kid, our thing was we'd make a guy as skinny as possible and as hairless as possible and with skin-colored tights, so it just looked like they were fighting a nude man.
Oh, that's
and it was the funniest thing when we were 12, just have Kane fighting a naked guy. Oh, this is outstanding. Matt McCarthy, please tell people where they can find you on the internet.
at McCarthy Redhead, all forms of social media, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and you can check out the We Watch Wrestling podcast. New episodes drop every Wednesday, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Well, it's such a pleasure to talk to both of you guys. John, thank you for being on again. Matt, thanks for coming on for the first time. We have to do this again, hopefully in person next time. But until then, thank you so much for listening. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Rivers Langley, and you can go to patreon.com/thegoodspod, where we drop bonus episodes all the time talking about wrestling and crappy movies and crappy records. We got a whole 100 hours, if not more at this point, of bonus content. So please check us out there. The second best way to support the show, head to Apple Podcasts, rate, review, and subscribe. Show that attitude of gratitude, because if you do not have the attitude of gratitude, daddy, fuck you.
The Goods from the Woods was mixed, edited, and distributed by me, Rivers Langley. You can find the show on Twitter at TheGoodsPod. Our theme song was composed by DJ Smiles. Check him out on Twitter at DJ Smiles.
This was a Brain Freeze podcast.